Tweed and Gene Simmons met at the Playboy Mansion in 1983. He finally married her after 28 years, but their 2011 wedding wasn't about love. The goal was to hide a scandal that almost killed his family. Newly found footage from their reality show shows talks that were never meant to be seen by the public. His son was found guilty of plagiarizing. Legal documents from 2025 talk about problems that involved female workers. It's not just his crazy image that the man who said he slept with 4,800 women is now having to deal with. Gene Simmons has changed over time. He was born in Haifa, Israel, on August 25, 1949, as Kaim Witz. Flora Klene, his mother, had just made it through hell. She was born in Hungary in 1925, and just barely got away from a Nazi prison camp. Yohiel Witz, his father, also ran away from Hungary and married Flora in 1946. They moved there in 1947, right before the country became a state. The path they were trying to take was blocked by British forces, so their past was painful. That pain would quietly echo through their lives. Things got worse by the time he was 6 years old in 1955. There wasn't enough money for his parents to stay together, so they split up. He stayed in Israel with his dad. In Tat Carmel, his mother raised him by herself. She worked almost every day in workshops just to pay the bills. For dinner, they sometimes only ate bread and milk. Kaim tried to help when she was 7 years old. He and a friend picked wild food and sold it by the road. He knew what it was like to fight. An army blanket became his first winter coat. He had to go out in the cold because he had no other choice. His mom worked late, so he often cried himself to sleep when the house was empty. Things didn't get better at school. He was picked on by other kids because he was different. Even in Israel after the war, some of the hate his mother had run away with followed him to school. But he also found something else. American comic books like Spider-Man and Superman were his way to escape. He tried even though he couldn't read English yet. He could speak Hebrew, Hungarian, and Turkish by the time he was 7 years old. He was now also learning English in secret, just so he could understand the heroes in those books. Those stories gave him something to hold on to in a world that was still recovering from war, with little food and little hope. Even though his mom didn't talk much about what she'd been through, the pain was always there. Kaim began to see it more clearly by 1957. The Nazis made her work picking potatoes in fields while soldiers watched with guns. She was only 14 years old at the time. As she moved from camp to camp wearing clothes with crosses on them, she watched her world disappear one family member at a time. It was clear without her having to say it. Kaim could tell she understood because she was quiet, overprotective, and sometimes cried for no reason. It also made him want to never be weak again and not let anyone see him break. In 1957, that same year, Flora made a choice that would change everything. She left Israel with 8-year-old Kaim and almost nothing on her. They forgot their money, English, and family when they got to Queens, New York. His dad stayed behind, got married again, and began a new life. Kaim didn't see him again. He changed his name to Eugene Clean and began again. The idea of flush toilets and TV dinners surprised him. But it wasn't easy to adjust. Flower worked in mills in Brooklyn for a lot of hours, sometimes 15 hours a day. Gene had babysitters to take care of himself, while he learned how to live in a strange new world. For a while, he went to a Jewish school, but he didn't fit in. After that, he went to public school. In 1967, he passed from Newtown High. Kids made fun of him at first for the way he talked. He always felt like a stranger because of his accent. He didn't let it break him, though. He sold cacti from door to door. Like he did in Israel, he picked apples again. Each snub and turn down made him work harder. By watching TV and reading more books, he started to learn English faster. That's when his love of pop culture went through the roof. In 1959, when he was only 9, he officially changed his name again, this time to Gene Clean. He named Gene after Gene Autry and other cowboy stars. It didn't matter that he still lived in a small room with his mother and cousins. He was proud to be American. He became deeply interested in TV, especially The Ed Sullivan Show. When the Beatles came out on February 9, 1964, he felt like something lit up inside him. He wished for that life. He was after the show and the fame. It was hard for him to feel like anyone because he still felt like the boy who had nothing. Just to fit in, he would sometimes act like he was British by copying the Beatles' voices. The girls liked it. He was awkward and confused, going through all the messy changes that come with being a teen. It was getting easier to like him, though. Gene worked at any job he could find in the 1960s. He cut meat at butcher shops for a living. He worked behind the bar in delis. He only made $1. $25 an hour, but he saved all of it. He learned to count every penny when he was poor. In parties and other events, he didn't drink. He saw how dirty and drunk older men got. He kept his mind sharp. That's how he met girls. He himself said it. While everyone else lost theirs, he kept his cool. He began to learn the guitar and practiced all the time. He couldn't stop after seeing the Beatles on TV. He got together with other people to make music and plan his future while he was still in school. The first time he went to college was in 1968. He went to school for teaching and got an associate's degree by 1970. For $75 a week, he taught 6th grade in Spanish Harlem. He didn't want to be in class, though. He got together with Paul Stanley to make a band called Rainbow. In 1970, they changed their name to Wicked Lester. At night, they played in bars, and during the day, they had other jobs. Gene had a job at a fashion magazine. He also translated for people and used the Hungarian, Turkish, and Spanish he learned from babysitters and neighbors when he was a kid. But music was his life. He tried out different sounds and even recorded some songs by himself. During this whole time, he sent money to his mother because he was still worried about her safety and everything she had lost in 1945. The part of his story that shocked even his fans came next. He says he lost his virginity in 1963, when he was almost 14 years old. He was just a kid delivering newspapers. He knocked on a customer's door one winter night, just before Christmas. She answered while crying and only had on a thin nightgown. She was married. What did you do next? He wrote more about it in his book later on. Not only was it the start of his sex life, Gene Simmons joined forces with Paul Stanley, Steve Coronel, Brooke Ostrander, and Tony Zarella in 1970. Their band is called Wicked Lester. The sound was a weird mix of folk and rock. It came from the fact that New York City's music scene is always changing. By October 15, 1972, they had made a whole album at Jimi Hendrix's Electric Lady Studios. It cost Epic Records a lot of money to make it happen, but Don Ellis, who was in charge of A&R, hated it so much. He said the sound was too messy and weird for radio, so he put it away for good. That turn down hurt Gene a lot. He put everything he had into the project, but it was over before it even started. Gene and Paul were so angry that they fired Steve Coronel, hired Ron Lejack for a short time, and then shut down Wicked Lester for good. That wasn't the end, though. It wasn't until 1977 that Gene and Paul paid $138,000 to buy back the old Wicked Lester tapes and make sure they never came out. They were afraid that the old sound would ruin the tough image they were trying to make. Still, later bootlegs of songs like She and Love Her All I Can were posted online. Kiss would later re-record these songs without giving credit to the original band. That band that didn't work out led to something bigger. Gene and Paul were done with giving in by January 1973. They came across an ad in Rolling Stone that was put there by Peter Criss, a sound engineer who has worked with bands like Lips and Chelsea. He quickly joined. Then they saw an ad in the Village Voice and found Ace Frehley. They made something brand new when they worked together. It wasn't going to be a normal rock band. Making up people, setting fires, and magic were all part of the crazy, over-the-top show. To get ideas for Kiss, they looked at Alice Cooper's shock rock and the New York Dolls glam style. On January 30th, 1973, they played their first show at the Coventry, a small club in Queens that used to be called the Popcorn Club. There were only 3 people there, and some of them were boyfriends of the band. But Gene breathed fire on stage for the first time that night. No one will ever forget the show. There wasn't a single hit song or MTV time that helped them build a fan base. Not the radio, but fan mags and live shows got the word out. Within 18 months, they were playing at Anaheim Stadium as the main act in 1974. After the fact, Gene said that their makeup was so weird and memorable that it stuck with people. It was real. It was strange and getting worse. Gene made the Demon in 1973. He painted bat wings around his eyes and started breathing fire and blood on stage, getting ideas from scary movies like Black Sabbath and comic book figures like Black Bolt. The tricks were taught to him by a pro. The band didn't have a plan when they first started playing around with makeup. Gene picked scary. He made whiskers on his face to look like a cat. Ace changed into an alien from space. It was crazy painting in front of mirrors as they tried to make something no one had ever seen before. In the beginning, only about 12 people showed up to their shows. The crowds at the Coventry were between 10 and 15 people, and sometimes even less. But those few people who stayed talked. Kids were getting the word out even before the internet. Gene said it was weird and sticky, but it worked. That makeup, fire, and blood changed anger into interest. They didn't need a hit on the radio. All they had to do was stand out. Bill Aucoin saw Kiss play at the Hotel Diplomat in August 1973. He was so sure of them that he said he would get them a record deal in 2 weeks. He did it. They signed with Neil Bogart's brand new record label, Casablanca Records, on November 1st. When Peter Criss heard the news, he was so happy that he almost fell off his platform heels. With help from producer Eddie Kramer, the band quickly made their first album. On February 18, 1974, it came out. At first, only 75,000 copies were sold, but the band didn't give up. That year, they did more than 300 shows. It looked like Casablanca Records was going out of business, but Kiss's constant traveling saved them. At first, Neil Bogart didn't believe their makeup trick would work, but when he saw the groups getting bigger, he knew it did. They played arenas full of people by 1975, but they didn't have a single big radio hit. Gene said it was a risk that made them famous. Gene picked up a strange habit in those early years. He started taking Polaroid pictures of the sex acts he was having. As proof, each woman had to show the room key. It was said that he had taken almost 5,000 of these pictures over the years, and that he had slept with more than 4,600 women. He even showed his friends and guests the pictures. Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane said it was gross. Gene locked them all up in a box. He burned them alive on their reality show after his wife Shannon Tweed found them after they got married in 2011. That was the end of that part of his life. Gene never used drugs, but his sex addiction became a part of his wild stage image. He turned chaos into a show and power in everything from small clubs to huge arenas. On September 10, 1975, everything changed. That's when the live album Alive came out. It was rough, loud, and full of the crazy energy of their shows. In every track, you could hear the fire, the screams, and the blood. During that year, songs were made in cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Wildwood, and Davenport. It sold over 4 million copies and went quadruple platinum on May 16th, June 21st, July 20th, and July 23rd. It stayed at number 9 on the Billboard charts for 110 weeks. That record kept Casablanca from going out of business. 9 Inch Nails was even being sued at the time. But Kiss's success pushed the label back from the edge. They got the idea for the record from Slade's 1972 live album, so the name Alive came from that. It showed that the makeup, the fire, and the crazy all worked. They were no longer just a strange band. They were rock's next big thing. They went further in 1976. Destroyer came out on March 15th and was produced by Bob Ezrin. It went to number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100 after he added strings, a choir of children, flipped the drum sounds, and sound effects. Gene's song, God of Thunder, was dark and full of screams. Ezrin didn't make it easy, though, when the band gave him 15 demos in August 1975. He threw most of them away. He changed the words to their songs, the order of the music, and he even played bass on Detroit Rock City. Some songs took ideas from classical music. For example, Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique was used as a sample in Great Expectations. In August 1975, during a break in the Alive tour, rehearsals began. Recordings continued at Electric Lady Studios through September and January of that year. Gene's pride grew with each win. Gene made sure his own personality stayed front and center, while Ezrin worked on the sound. The tours were no longer just shows by the late 1970s. It was clear that they were shows. From June 15, 1979 to December 16, 1979, the Dynasty Tour went on. Gene flew across the stage, and Ace Frehley's guitar fired rockets at smoke-making props. These amazing effects were made by their technician John Elder Robeson. It was clear that they were having trouble after 92 shows across North America. Too few people showed up at some places, like the Pontiac Silverdome shows that had to be canceled, or the smaller Los Angeles gigs. Peter Criss was having a hard time. His drug use got worse. He started ruining shows by stopping to lash out, while playing the drums in the middle of a set. It was called Self-Destruction, by Gene. It was clear that the original band was breaking up by the time of the last show in Toledo on December 16th, 1979. Fans could tell there was a change. Disco was now a part of their sound. Families began to go to shows instead of die-hard rock fans. Gene kept flying, but the band was quickly catching up. Things got weird in 1978. On October 28th, NBC showed a strange TV movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. It was made by Hanna-Barbera, the company that made Scooby-Doo. Kiss played themselves as superheroes in a theme park battle against a bad creator. Gene made up lines about taking over the world, which was similar to his real-life plan to make Kiss a worldwide brand. Fans really didn't like the playing at all. The rest of the band tried to act like it never happened, but Gene loved all the attention. People on the set were told they couldn't talk about the movie again because it was so embarrassing. Some people really liked it, especially in Europe, where they changed the name to Attack of the Phantoms. The project showed that Gene's ego wasn't just big, it could not be stopped. On September 18th that same year, all 4 members came out with solo records. Some of Kiss's real group CDs didn't sell as well as Gene's. It had strange versions of songs like When You Wish Upon a Star and Cher and Bob Seger as guests. In his songs, he sang about radiation and crazy dreams. Kiss's Dynasty came out on May 23, 1979, and the song I Was Made for Loving You made it to number 11 on the Billboard lists. It went silver in 5 countries and sold more than 1 million copies. But the dance style made them look bad. Fans of rock music left and ticket sales dropped sharply. Venues got smaller. The magic was going away. Before he quit for good, Peter Criss played drums on just 1 track. There were cracks that had turned into splits. Kiss did something terrible on September 18, 1983. On MTV, they took off their makeup live. They finally showed their real faces after 10 years of being hidden. At the same time, they put out Lick It Up, which sold more than 1 million copies and went platinum. The sound was rougher, louder, and more angry. It paid off. Sales went through the roof and fans kept coming back. Gene saw it as a new start. Kiss had already made a lot of money from merchandise by that point, with over 100 approved items ranging from action figures to lunchboxes. There were no masks left, but business was great. In 1984, Gene stopped making music and went into show business. In the sci-fi movie Runaway, directed by Michael Crichton, he played the bad guy Luther. Because he was a devil, he was a crazy scientist who killed people with killer robots. Gene said his lines with dramatic flair and died because of the things he made up. In the meantime, Peter Criss was fired from the band in 1980 because his drug use got out of hand. Gene said it was an important surgery. Eric Carr, also known as the Fox, took over as the new drummer. They were hurt by the loss, but it gave them a chance to start over. The track Forever from Kiss's 1989 album. Hot in the Shade reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was their biggest hit during the no makeup years and sold over 500,000 copies. The sound, on the other hand, was soft and lovely, not angry. Fans were lost, but sales showed otherwise. Gene was still after women behind the scenes. His affairs got in the way of the band's work. He wasn't at sessions. He chose to be in Hollywood over practicing. Eric Carr sang lead for the first time on Little Caesar, but it was also his last record before he died in 1991. Gene kept pulling things away, which almost broke everything. Gene told the whole truth in his book, Kiss and Makeup, which came out in 2001. During his time in the band, he slept with more than 4,800 women. In the late 1970s, one of the craziest stories happened. From 1979 to 1980, he dated Cher, but in the end, he fell in love with Diana Ross, who was Cher's best friend. What began as a simple trip to do Christmas shopping turned into a full-on love triangle. Cher never forgot about them. It was written about in People magazine and became one of the most well-known betrayals in rock history. Gene kept in touch with both people, but the damage was done. It got even stranger after that. In 1996, the original members of Kiss got back together. The makeup came back. Every show was sold out. They played in 92 towns, 75 cities, and sold 1 million copies. 2 million tickets. It made $143 million for the trip. Things were tense behind the scenes, though. Frehley and Criss were paid $80,000 per show, while Gene and Paul got $110,000 plus bonus money. Then came lawsuits. Old wounds got worse again. Things did go well, but there were also problems. When they broke records, they also broke up again. Between 2006 and 2012, Gene Simmons let cameras follow him around on a show called Gene Simmons Family Jewels. Fans could see right into his life at home with his partner Shannon Tweed and their 2 kids, Nick and Sophie. For 7 years, the show was A&E's second most popular show, after Dog the Bounty Hunter. The show showed Simmons as kinder and more focused on his family, but it didn't show much of his wild past. Then, in 2008, a sex tape came out that showed him with someone else. He went to court and said it was an invasion of privacy. In 2011, Gene finally married Shannon after putting it off for 28 years. This was the biggest turn of events. The wedding was in the news. Some watchers thought the show went too far, like when it faked a deal to buy an Australian football team. But it still made a man who was once only known for his makeup and chaos seem more real. Gene's business empire kept getting bigger. By the 2000s, he had put the kiss mark on more than 5,000 different items. It was on pinball machines, condoms, and even graves. It was easy to find the name. Over $1 billion was made in sales. Then, in 2017, he did something wrong. Gene tried to get a trademark for the well-known Devil's Horns hand sign by saying he came up with it in 1974. People were angry right away. He said it looked like the sign for I love you in American Sign Language, with the thumb out and the index and pinky fingers up. Metal fans were very angry. People who didn't like him pointed out that John Lennon and Ronnie James Dio had used the move before Kiss. Gene dropped the plan a few days later, but the stunt showed how far he was willing to go to get power. He had trouble with him in other places too. In 2010, Gene was sued by Victoria Jackson, an ESPN makeup artist, who said he acted badly while dressed up for a 2009 SportsCenter appearance. He hugged and humped her, she said. Gene said it wasn't true, because his metal codpiece wouldn't let that happen. He went so far as to file a countersuit to clear his name. The case was finally over, but that wasn't the only time he got in trouble with the law. In 2016, a dishwasher at his Rock and Brews diner said he touched her inappropriately. In 2017, another woman said the same thing. By 2018, both cases had been quietly closed, even though he often said these lawsuits were without any basis. They added up and pointed to a troubling trend. In spite of everything, his wealth kept growing. He was worth more than $400 million by 2015. It wasn't just music that did that. It came from piles of Kiss stuff, over 100 million records sold, and tours all the time. In 2012, he and Paul Stanley opened a chain of restaurants called Rock and Brews, which now has more than one site. He also got involved in some strange projects, like The Vault, a $2,000 collection of rare records that came out in 2017. He also became chief evangelist officer of a weed company called Invictus MD in 2018. In 2013, he joined the LA Kiss Arena football team, but it broke up after a few years. By 2025, his single tour was making 6 figures per show without even needing the full Kiss setup. The first time he met Shannon Tweed was at the Playboy Mansion in 1983. Shannon, who was named Playmate of the Year in 1982, knew Gene had a bad name when he met him. He had almost 5,000 lovers by 2002, but they still made a life together. Nick was born in 1989, and Sophie was born in 1992. Gene would quote Groucho Marx to make jokes about how marriage was a trap, but Shannon finally had enough of Gene's behavior. She walked off the Joy Behar show in 2011 and called him a pig. Later that same year, she found his collection of sexy Polaroids and set them on fire. Fans were shocked at that time, but something changed. On July 26, 2011, Gene asked her to marry him in Buys. On October 1, 2011, they were married. Nick was the best man, and Sophie was the maid of honor. It was intense and a surprise, especially since they had been fighting it for 28 years. The tension wasn't hidden by their TV show. The turning point came in season 6, when Shannon left for a short time because of a picture of Gene with 2 models at an event in Santa Monica in 2009. After going to treatment, she said she never agreed to be in an open relationship and felt caught off guard by the show. Gene finally told her that he was afraid of marriage because of his childhood. Everyone was shocked when he asked her to marry him.